Okay, so after the Super Bowl, there was one visionary who saw the situation and said, this is the time, the longest amount of time before NFL football, and decided to get on the radio like the true visionary, the true hero that he was, and goes, where is the urgency for this team? And now, in response to that, that hero, Tony Rizzo, who I assume was recording something for him to basically recycle later and not show up to work one day, he got the action that was suddenly the Browns have made several moves with their coaching. I don't assume this would have happened if not for this rant and raving that made no sense in February. But here we are. The Browns fired Mike Priefer pretty unceremoniously, and kind of curious on the timing, although it sort of will explain why it sort of seems to work out. And they have hired a safeties coach whose name I'm going to remember at some point. With that, the Browns have made the decision that they are going to have a safeties and a corners coach. Obviously, when the Browns last year with Joe Woods, the defensive coordinator, he had Jeff Howard, who was the DB's coach, and then Joe Woods himself was effectively the next other guy for that room. The Browns have, in response to firing by Priefer, have requested the ability to interview Giants coach Anthony Blevins, and then they've requested the ability to interview Bubba Ventrone of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the people in Indianapolis believe that that Bubba Ventrone is a done deal, that it's going to happen. And if that's the case, that's a pretty big deal. You've got reporters in Indianapolis basically saying that Ventrone is sort of an elite special teams coach. Given what we've seen from Indianapolis the last season, there isn't a whole lot that people covering the Colts are going to be super excited about. So to actually have some say, no, this guy's really good is interesting. He played 4 years for the Browns, early 2000s as a special teams guy. He has no neck, so his vision will be firmly placed forward. He's looking ahead. He's not worried about what's behind, which is interesting. If that happens, and obviously they have to make this work, it's a reasonably sized deal. Look, Mike Priefer, beyond his off-field commentary, which has a lot of people were more than ready to say goodbye, Mike Priefer, for that. I hope for his sake that he has sort of learned and grown from those comments and really sort of embraced why he was wrong and sort of changed his view. I don't know one way or the other. But in his first 2 seasons with Stefanski, he had bottom 5 special teams unit. This past year, they were terrible for the first half of the season and sort of really rallied and ended up being 14th according to DVOA, which is interesting. I think that was the argument that sort of they did really good at the end. I mean, he helped special teams helped beat the Houston Texans. It helped beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It contributed to some of their late game push, especially when they were sort of struggling with Deshaun Watson trying to figure his way out. So there was some thought that, then, they didn't fire him when they fired Joe Woods. They basically said, there's going to be an evaluation period. And it just kept hanging out. And you're just sort of I guess they're going to keep Mike Priefer. And you could sort of look at it and go, well, on the strength of that second half of the season, maybe they felt really good about what he was doing. Maybe they didn't want to mess with Cade York, the kicker. And then the Colts, and this is sort of the way the hiring cycle has changed in the NFL. It's taken a lot longer. And I think, honestly, it's good because it always felt like it was such a stupid race early on. And you'd have coaches that were being hired almost sight unseen, like when the Browns hired Stefanski and Dallas could not wait to hire Mike McCarthy. And everybody's like, the Browns missed out. The Browns missed out. That is disappearing. And you've seen teams take a lot more time. It's easy to make fun of Jim Irsay and the Colts. I do it. But to their credit, they did take a very long, deliberate process to get to Shane Steichen, in hiring Steichen. They've sort of opened themselves up to having some of these guys leave. Bubba Ventrone would be in that group that could potentially leave. And that would be seemingly a very big upgrade. And as I keep referring, this season, all these decisions that the Browns are making, to me, for Kevin Stefanski, it's all a giant opportunity. This 4th year, he gets to do it his way. He's going to go out He's either going to succeed or it's going to fail, but he's going to do it on his terms. Now, that was a very long intro. Bree, I know you and I were just texting back and forth all about our favorite Bubba Ventrone memories from his time as a player. You told me about the time of who is this? I don't remember that. Great times. I had a similar thought process. You know, the special teams mavens of this team with Brant Boyer and Larry Izzo and the type that just, you know, you will tell your kids about at some point, I'm sure. Your reaction, because I know you were like me, were surprised when you found out Mike Priefer was done.
Yeah, so it's a good thing that Pete texted me this morning as I was walking into work with this news. Otherwise, I don't know that I would have even have known it happened, because for some reason, none of my notifications were popping up on my phone. I wasn't really on social media that much today. So thanks to Pete, I am prepared for this podcast episode as much as I can be. However, as Pete mentioned, I have a terrible memory. I don't remember anything. Things that are not important to me, I don't remember. This would be a case of that. Browns weren't super important in my life. Didn't retain any memories. I do remember, though. What year was this, Pete, that he was on the Browns?
I think it was on like 2001 to 2005 area.
Oh yeah, that was my end of high school, college years. I wasn't like super into football. Like I'd watch casually, but I wasn't like I am now. So I have matured in my football fandom, particularly the Browns. So that makes sense why I don't remember that. To be honest, though, Pete, I don't really remember a lot of things, even things that are important to me. So we talked about, I think maybe I need to get my memory looked at. I'm going downhill. So this hiring 10 years from now, I also will probably forget and not remember. So if we're still doing this podcast, you can ask me when they're on their 5th special teams coordinator again in 10 years, if I remember this hire. The answer will be no. So anyway, yes. Thank you for texting me. Good riddance to Priefer, to be honest with you,
Right.
Pete. Like, good riddance. I was actually a little bit surprised that he wasn't the first to be gone on this staff.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I always thought that Joe Woods had a stronger case to stay on the staff than Priefer did.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. You know, what's so weird about the team and their evaluations is this team just truly lacks consistent level of play. We've talked about that too. Outside of the offense seemed to be more consistent than the other two facets of the game. It's just that the defense and special teams, for whatever reason, always seem to start this season very slow or like they're not prepared. And this isn't just a one-year incident. Like, this now has happened multiple years in a row. And it is infuriating to watch as a fan start the season like the team has never played football before. I'm okay with moving on based on the fact that I don't want to just bank on, oh, well, they showed improvement towards the end of the season. No, they need to start better prepared, a lot cleaner, look like a competent group of individuals. And for Mike Priefer, to me, he just hasn't had that level of consistency regardless of what year it was as the special teams coordinator. And that has been probably one of the most disappointing factors out of all of it, because whenever he spoke to the media, I didn't feel like he was super transparent. One of the things that I always liked about Joe Woods was I actually felt like he was pretty transparent and open-minded.
Felt like a human.
Exactly. And Mike Priefer to me just sounded like a robot. And that may have to do with his military upbringing and experience. So that makes sense to me. It just rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know. I just wasn't a huge fan of his. So as I said, good riddance. This Bubba guy, like, he just sounds like a football coach. I don't know what he looks like. I didn't even Google what he looks like. But if you said he has no neck, like the no neck plus the name Bubba, like that sounds like a great hire, Pete, just based on that alone.
It's interesting that you thought that with Mike Priefer. I always thought he came off really confident and really competently. That doesn't mean he was good. It just, when you listen to him, he always sounded very matter of fact. He was always positive about things and I think that was ultimately part of the problem is he would tell you how great certain people were. And you're sitting there going, you pounded the table for Demetric Felton. You don't really use him anymore. I mean, I know he's a gunner, but you're telling me all these things are great. And in some ways I get it. There's sort of like this, you know, you're trying to project confidence because you want those players to sort of take that on. You don't want to sit there and go, I don't know if Cade can do this type thing. And then, get into his head. I think there's a method to the madness. I agree with you. I always felt like Joe Woods came off more like a human, like a person who's trying to give you a real honest, what he thinks.
Right. And just to elaborate a little bit, it wasn't, I didn't necessarily want him to talk badly about the players or call out or point fingers at any one person. I felt like Joe Woods was open to accepting some blame and accountability. And I felt like Priefer was kind of always deflecting accountability, as you mentioned, like very positive as if everything was just fine and going to be fine. Like, I don't know, like I think there's something about, like, I know everyone gets frustrated with listening to Kevin Stefanski's press conferences because he consistently says, we need to do better. I need to do better.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that. I like the fact that he is taking and wants that blame to be, he wants to shoulder all of that as the head coach. For whatever reason, Priefer, to me, like I said, he just was very robotic, like going through the motions in a sense.
It always, look, I think Joe Woods was always very introspective. I think in a lot of ways, Mike Priefer was always job interview.
Yes.
Or like he was, receiving a performance review.
Right.
As opposed to, what do you think type thing like that.
Yes.
So I think in some ways his like polish made him in some ways come off artificial. And I don't necessarily think he's an artificial person. It's just that can wear on you the way he does that, where you're just sort of like, he's a guy where I think if you had a conversation and you walk in the other room and you're sitting there and you suddenly go to you, I didn't learn anything from this type thing, as opposed to maybe Joe Woods are like, okay, I feel like I at least understand where he's coming from and I got some value out of this, but whatever. What I find interesting about this whole thing is because the Colts took the time they did and the Browns basically, fired him and all of a sudden they're requesting permission to talk to these guys. I think they basically did the legwork and the homework to basically find out that they could make this hire. And like people were who criticized Kevin Stefanski for being too nice and too buddy. But this is the most cutthroat thing Kevin Stefanski's done as a head coach. Like if Mike Priefer didn't have the reputation he did because of the things he said in his past, there's an argument that you could say this is pretty cold-hearted.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question. How do all of the Kevin Stefanski doubters feel about this move? Because a lot of people that don't support Kevin, I feel like have always kind of felt that he is maybe a little bit too nice or soft in a way that he wouldn't make these moves. And to your point, Pete, like it's not only that he let him go, it's the time, because it's pretty late in it to release a coach and have that coach be able to be hired by another team and join their team. I mean, Kevin Stefanski is making moves.
Yeah, and look, again, the way that this calendar is worked out, it feels late. And part of you sitting there going, I don't know, is Mike Priefer going to be able to get another job type thing? And I think one, ultimately, that's not Kevin Stefanski's worry. But two, I do think just the way that everything is sort of worked, that there is time for that because there are so many staffs that are getting organized. But now the pivot is going to be for people who are like Kevin Stefanski's too soft or whatever. Now it's going to be, well, Kevin Stefanski's gotten rid of so many coaches. Why did we keep Kevin Stefanski in the first place? And, that's going to come. But like, this is the thing, like with Tony Rizzo be like, where's the sense of urgency? I don't know, man. He traded 35 picks for Deshaun Watson and they guaranteed him $230 million. They traded for Amari Cooper. They fired Joe Woods and brought in Jim Schwartz. And now they're bringing in, if they get this done. And like I said, it sounds like it's going to happen. They're going to hire Bubba Ventrone. What do you mean? Where's the sense of urgency? They're like here, they're doing this. They are making moves. They're saying we are here to win. ultimately Ventrone or whoever they hire for any of these coaching spots, because this is the response I get, and it's perfectly rational. It's the one you're ultimately going to give me. I don't care who these people are. Win football games. That being said, Ray Ventrone's reputation is a good one. It does matter that people are like, no, that's a good hire. It does. That perception is important. I do think that players are going to be sort of like, hey, wait a minute, that's pretty good. Maybe I'm more interested in Cleveland, or I'm learning to listen to Cleveland, or hey, I want to stay in Cleveland to play for this guy. That's the other part. And then beyond that, if Ventrone, who is, I think, with Indianapolis for 5 years, is coming here, does that mean he feels good about where this thing is going? Like the obvious criticism for Stefanski when it was going into the offseason, well, how good are the coaches is he going to hire if the perception is that it's a temporary job, that it's one and done? And there are plenty of people who are willing to say that, oh, maybe the Browns missed out on other guys, and Jim Schwartz was willing to do that. Some of those people are sitting there going, oh, maybe they are more, sound and maybe the foundation is a little more sound than we thought it was if Ventrone is going there, because, as I said, he is a big deal coach. And, this all sounds good in February, but if they aren't good in September through January, nobody's going to care. But at the very least, we can say, looking at it right now, that Jim Schwartz is probably better than Joe Woods. And we can say that Bubba Ventrone is probably better than Mike Priefer. That is good ultimately, though. And that thing you didn't say to me, but you're 100% right on, is I don't care if it doesn't produce wins this season. And that's 100% true. I think that's ultimately important, but I do think, I think Kevin Stefanski, and that's the other part, is I have never looked at it like this is pressure. I've always looked at this like opportunity, because again, I've laid this out in other podcasts. If you were to set up a situation for Kevin Stefanski, I've got Deshaun Watson, Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Njoku, this offensive line, and Nick Chubb. I love my situation, and I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to be able to do all these things. So, people can paint this as desperate, or it doesn't look good that they're replacing their coaches right now. That's fine, and maybe they're right. But I think from Stefanski's standpoint, or if you were in his shoes, you're sitting there going, I really like my situation, and now I've got what I believe are better coaches than I had before. When we went to this whole coaching thing, it was, I just want my defense and my special teams to look a lot more like the offensive staff does. And yes, right now, first blush, you're sitting there going, we'll see what happens. But Jim Schwartz and if it's Bubba Ventrone, look a hell of a lot better relative to the offensive staff than what we had.
Agreed. If I go back in hindsight this past season, I'm going to mention it again. The defense and special teams started off really slow. They made some critical mistakes in games that felt a little bit meaningless at the time, but games that should have been won. Mm-hmm. There were epic collapses. There were colossal mistakes that, in most cases, typically don't happen. The offense, on the flip side, outperformed the expectations. They started out with a bang. They did what they needed to do in order to win football games. And if you're going back on this coaching staff, and as Kevin Stefanski, who has to make these decisions, I'm sitting there saying, had we started off the season differently, had we not lost to the Jets and blown that massive lead, had we not lost to Atlanta, had we not lost to, what was the other game that we lost to that we should have won in that stretch where we were playing all these quarterbacks that literally lost all of their jobs within like halfway through the season? I've already forgotten. I've blacked it out. But those were moments that you can sit there and say, if we would have made this play on defense, if we would have made this play on special teams, we would have won those football games. So I'm okay with this situation of like, we need to upgrade not only from a player situation, which I know we'll talk about that as we get through these next few months, but also the coaching staff. And we've hit this too, Pete, in our last couple of episodes. It's not only the coaches coaching the players, it's building that staff that's able to help build the staff underneath them and help coach up their coaching staff.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at the offensive staff, I feel a lot more confident in what they have and who they've built, even though I know that there's some turnover that has happened today as well that they need to backfill. But even with still who is on the offensive side of the ball, I feel very, very good with who is running that show and what they are building around it. It was the defense and special team side that just didn't feel like they were up to standard. And so Kevin Stefanski obviously felt that way too, and is making decisions to turn this ship around because they just can't afford to start this way at the beginning of the season. Like, all of these games matter, Pete. All of these games matter. Like, you cannot start this next season slow again, right? I think they have full confidence in their offense and that they will get Deshaun Watson in a place where he will look more like the old Deshaun Watson and be able to build that and piece that together. But they've got to be able to put it together on the defensive side of the ball and have special teams play to a level that is above just mediocre. This football team is too comfortable being mediocre.
Right. Now, let's just, based on what you just said and talking about those early collapses they had, let's say that Jim Schwartz is worth one win. Let's say that Bubba Ventrone is worth one win. Just eliminating those two things. Now the Browns are 9-8.
Exactly.
And the whole complexion of the team is different. So if that's the difference, then it's worth it. And ultimately, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and to be fair, you cannot expect the offense to exceed expectations every single game. Like, there's going to be really good defenses that they face. There are going to be moments where they can't just score at will. So you need to be able to balance your football team with having special teams step up and make game-winning plays, or the defense to step up and essentially keep them in the game. That's what the Browns have not been able to do. They have not been able to have one side of the ball step up when the other one maybe is struggling, or they're playing a really good defense. Like, that's something that this team hasn't been able to do that other really good teams are able to do in order to win. I don't need them to win by 30 points. We just need them to win.
30 would be nice. But yeah, no, you're right.
Great.
And you know, the other game you can throw in there that mattered was the Ravens. The Browns beat the Ravens in a small part because of special teams. But here again, if you're sitting there going, yes, it's great that the Browns special teams came up and defense came up big against the Houston Texans, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Baltimore Ravens with Tyler Huntley. And you can already, you're already sitting there going, okay, but that's not the teams that we think are going to be in the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
And that's sort of where we have to take that next step. And I think the Browns are betting that these guys are that next step. Now, you did a really nice segue by mentioning that the Browns did lose another coach, Drew Petzing. We sort of teased this was going to happen. He is in Arizona. He's going to be the offensive coordinator there, and he's currently working to poach some of the guys that the Browns have brought in under various things.
Offensive control guy, right?
Yeah, like you get into Bill Willis Foundation and stuff like that. These various guys you can sort of hire, and that's great. It's a testament that is working, that those guys are going. I think one of those guys is going to go coach quarterbacks for him in Arizona, which is awesome. It means that that is paying off in the way it would. Now that means the Browns need to hire a quarterbacks coach, and I say this with Ventrone. I know 5% of the information I really need to know to say this is a good move. Like, even with Ventrone, I can say this looks great because they were really good at special teams the last couple of years. We'll see. In the same way, there is a coach that has connection to Kevin Stefanski, that if he's able to get out of Baltimore, I would be very excited about for that quarterback coaching position, and that is James Urban. James Urban has a very long connection to Kevin Stefanski because Kevin Stefanski played at Penn, and he was a coach at Penn before they went off to various places. And Urban has been Lamar Jackson's only quarterbacks coach in the NFL. And when I mentioned the idea of hiring Urban, I go, oh, look at the Ravens offense. I don't care. He has worked with quarterbacks who play like Deshaun Watson a lot. So Lamar Jackson, obviously, Tyler Huntley, and say what you will about Tyler Huntley and being a Pro Bowler and all that. Tyler Huntley, for all of his faults, almost won a playoff game, and he always at least looks prepared. You can say he's just not very good, but he's always prepared to play football. And even with some of the other guys that they've had, like the dude from Penn State, when the Browns had to play him for a minute. Now, before he was with the Ravens, he was, he's been with other teams. Like in 2009 and 2010, he was with the Eagles and Andy Reid. And who was the quarterback then? That was Michael Vick, fresh out of prison, who's another, athletic quarterback who could create with his legs. And Michael Vick was very good for those years. So it's not only that he's had a ton of experience, and I think that would be super valuable for not only Deshaun Watson, but Kellen Mond, and just having a guy who's been comfortable working with those type of guys and sort of understands the give and take with a guy who can create, and sort of having an understanding of where you draw the line of, no, I don't want to take the playmaker out of the guy, but we have to be able to do certain things. And I also think with that, you get a sense of some of the ways to transform your offense around that. And no, that doesn't mean I want the Browns to run freaking Greg Roman's offense and some of the stuff they did there. But what people miss out on that is, like, part of that is protections. Part of that is ability to sort of, how are you blocking for a quarterback who's able to do some of these things, or some of the running concepts that you could do. And I think that could be super valuable. Now, the Ravens have just hired Todd Monken as their offensive coordinator. There's been no indication of what's going to happen with the staff, but I suspect if that is a possibility, that the Browns would jump on that, and I think it would be really good. And that's the other part of that whole weird thing, is Todd Monken took that job with no assurances whatsoever that Lamar Jackson would be the quarterback there. And now all of a sudden, the Browns are a really interesting team this offseason, but like the Ravens are the team to watch in the offseason, because you have no idea what's going to happen. I don't think Lamar Jackson is going to be there this fall. And if he's not, what does that team look like? What do they do with all those things? And then, what is the fallout from that thing? So I'm very interested. So we shall see. I look at the quarterback coaching position. The Browns are really like 3 deep at that spot. And that's not to say that Drew Petzing was good, bad, or otherwise. I assume he did a perfectly fine job. Obviously, he was thought highly enough of to be an offensive coordinator. But we literally read or heard that, like, Kevin Stefanski's in the quarterback room constantly, and Alex Van Pelt has coached quarterbacks at various times. So there's a lot of people sort of in that, in that area of the field, in that area of coaching that position. So, I'm not super worried about that position. I just think a guy like James Urban, and maybe they have somebody else in mind, gives you some sort of flexibility on how you want to approach that position to find the best fit for you and the best fit for your players. Like, I've seen some other people thrown out that don't make a whole lot of sense to me, but that's, we'll see what happens, but it's at least interesting to me that could be a possibility.
Yeah, it sounds great. I don't know why people would be mad about that as a potential option.
Offense, blah.
Yeah, and Lamar Jackson obviously has played very well for the Ravens.
Yes.
And in my opinion, has probably exceeded expectations a bit as well. And I would say he's also improved when he has been able to be healthy and be on the field. But yeah, to your point, like, he may not even be there. So feels like that is a pretty strong possibility, not to mention with the fact that there is a new offensive coordinator coming in to the Ravens. So, who knows what Monken's going to want to do with his staff and what that's going to look like. But do you think that Deshaun Watson is going to have any type of input as to who they would hire to be QB coach if they do decide to hire someone?
To the extent that I think he's going to be like, yeah, I think it's a good fit, or no, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. Do I think he's going to be like, you hire this guy? No,
yeah,
because
no. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying, like, will they ask him?
Yeah, I would assume they'll get some sort of input, but like, this is the thing. Like, people are like, well, he's going to handpick his own guy. He already did. His name's Quincy Avery. He's his private quarterbacks coach. Like, if that was that big of an issue, he's got a guy. So
yeah,
and not randomly, it just seems odd and interesting. Like, I think it was either today or yesterday, I saw Quincy Avery praising the shit out of Lamar Jackson for like tying his feet and his eyes together, which would suggest he seems to think at least decently of that guy, of the guy who's coaching him. So who knows if that's like just, laying some groundwork or whatever, but like, I don't think it's that big of a deal because for all those reasons. He's got Quincy Avery, and really his guy he can go to if he doesn't like the quarterbacks coach, he's gonna go to Stefanski anyway. So
right.
It matters a little. But I'm not too worried about it. It's interesting that's why I think it's interesting, is because I'm curious to see the direction they go for that exact reason. So
I need to tone down my level of excitement, Pete. This is getting me too excited for February. It's February. I got to tone it down. I got to bring it all down.
Are you sounding like you did you accidentally get invested in this team several months early?
Yeah, I gotta get back down a couple notches. I'm like too high. I gotta stay somewhere in the middle.
Fair enough. Okay, so that's where we're at coaching wise. Oh, and the guy's name that they hired for the safeties coach, Ephraim, something rolls right off the tongue. That's I assume that's a family name.
I saw it today earlier, but it was not one that stuck with me.
Ephraim Banda. Anyway, Ephraim Banda. Yes. Just
trust you on that.
Was a defensive coordinator / safeties coach at Utah State, was a safeties coach and co-defensive coordinator with the University of Miami before that. Okay. Like, that's the extent of information I have. He's 41. We're there. All right. And he played safety at some point. Anyway, so the other thing that we're going to sort of get into is some of the player decisions that the Browns are going to come upon or are already making these next couple weeks. Some of them I don't think are really decisions, but one of the guys that has gotten a whole lot of attention is Jedrick Wills, left tackle, 10th pick overall, the 2020 draft. Has been up and down. There are some games you look at and you're like, all right, this is pretty good. And there's some other games where you're sitting there going, yeah, that's one way to do it. And he has to have some of the worst body language I've ever seen on a football field. And I say some of because I'm familiar with bad body language on football players, and if he was ever to be questioned on it, I had a kid I coached in high school, Donnie Washington from Purdue, had some of the worst body language I've ever seen, but he's phenomenally like 6'2", 210 pounds, and would slouch like Shaggy from freaking Scooby-Doo, for people who are even remotely old enough to remember that.
Wait, Peter, are you talking body language in terms of how he is in position, or body language like post play on the sideline?
That was just him in life for the most part. He would have never looked like he was excited to be anywhere.
Is that how you're describing Jed Wills as well? Like, that's the type of body language you were using? This is sort of like
well, I think Jedrick Wills has better like just average posture. Like I said, Donnie looked like he was never excited to be anywhere. And which is funny because he's like one of the nicest kids, was like a 4-something student, was a phenomenal running back and outside linebacker, like just extremely gifted. He just, whether it was something didn't go right or, he just wasn't feeling it that day, would look like he wanted to be anywhere else.
Got it.
And if Donnie listens to the podcast, he can freely admit to all that. And I wish him the best of luck as he's still in college, entering his junior season. That in part gives me some insight into Jedrick Wills. I think in some ways, Jedrick Wills stops playing at times and it looks really bad. I think in part because he's embarrassed and he just doesn't know how to deal with it.
He's embarrassed. Oh no.
Right, which is not going to help him when people listen to this. Like, he's embarrassed. He should be. Get him off the team. Yeah, all that stuff. The other part I never know, because it always looks bad, is I don't know what he's being told on some of these things. Because they have Deshaun Watson, and this is particularly the case when they had Deshaun Watson, I don't know if they're basically told that, look, your inclination is to go chase after the guy that just got past you. And I don't know if they're like sort of being said, no, hold on a second, wait, because if Watson escapes, he's going to then need you out there to sort of block somebody else. But that being said, it's like with Jed, I can't help but also feel like there are times when he just doesn't look like he wants to be out there. And and I think some of that might be he's a momentum type football player that when things go well, he tends to do well. And when things go bad, he tends to sort of check out. I don't know what to make of that, but they're not going to trade him. They're not going to get rid of him. And there's like this suggestion that, well, the Browns can just get rid of Jedrick Wills and just find a guy. Yeah, that's a really good plan at left tackle.
I was going to say that seems to be one of the most illogical things that I've ever seen on Twitter is when you have these key franchise positions, essentially, where you can just let go and or trade these players and think that you can just pick up Joe Schmo off the street and he's going to be able to fill in and be better than what you have. That is not a plan. That is acting very irrational. I don't understand why that becomes an argument.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the Browns have tried that. And they got Desmond Harrison and Greg Robinson.
Well, yeah, those were dark days out in the John Dorsey era, right? Like that was when John Dorsey had a lot of faults, and valuing the offensive line was detrimental in 2019, along with a lot of other things. But he went out and got the flashy player and unfortunately sacrificed a pretty important position overall.
Yeah, and that part of it is left tackles just cost a lot of money. Like average tackles are making like $14 million. So 6.2, I get it. You don't like it because you're sitting there going, well, look at him. He doesn't look like,
he's no Joe Thomas, right? That's the benchmark.
And it's not fair. I think there are criticisms to be made of Jedrick Wills that are beyond, well, he's not Joe Thomas and he's not a Hall of Fame left tackle. Like there are things, where you watch him on tape, he seems to be slow out of his stance, and that seems to be a problem that continues to linger. And some of the things he gets fooled on consistently are problematic. He's still 23 years old, which is unbelievable to think about given how much football he's played. And at this point, you have to look at him like David Njoku, in terms of you hope that he's going to figure it out because, after year one and year two, especially year two, everybody's like, Njoku's going to figure it out and Njoku's good. Yeah, that, it's what is still his career high in yardage after year two. And then year three, he got hurt and was a miserable experience. He had that whole fiasco where he didn't get the surgery when he should have, and then tried to let it heal itself and it didn't. So then he had to have surgery. Mm-hmm. He was out a really long time and he was like useless that year. And then the next year he was just he got way better blocking, but just wasn't really an impactful player in the passing game. And then, they go ahead and extend him based off of where a lot of people are like, get rid of him. And it worked. And I'm not suggesting the Browns do that, but I think they are at that point where now entering year 4, they have to hope that Jedrick Wills, one, and I do think this is similar to Njoku, has to grow up. And that was a big part of Njoku had to grow up. I think Jedrick Wills has to grow up. Does he really want to be a professional football player? I don't like asking that question because it comes with connotations, but I that is a question he has to ask himself. Is this for him? Or is
and I would just go ahead, finish.
I was going to say, or is he just in it for the initial rookie deal and then he's sort of going to move on with his life?
That is my biggest question mark with Jed, is his give a damn level. Like, does he actually want to improve? Does he want to better himself? I mean, he is playing on an offensive line that is filled with veterans. And then Wyatt Teller, who, isn't a veteran, but he's been in the league long enough. He's obviously very well respected, got paid a big contract. And then you have Jed, who is the youngest on the line, playing a very important position. And I almost feel like because he is surrounded by such talent and strong players that he has almost been able to, I don't want to say coast, but I think they've been able to cover up maybe some of Jed's mistakes. And I think that's not where we want to be at this point in time, especially with the year he's in and the potential contract that we would need to give him. My hope is that his motivation is not only to get paid, but to also show improvement and be motivated to get better to help this team win football games. And right now, that is a question that I think stands to be answered.
Now, the one thing that is to his credit, and maybe they are just being really good guys and really good teammates. His teammates in the offensive line room all swear he's a hard worker and everything else, and they like have his back 100%.
Well, that's fine. That's all fair, and I'm sure that he is. I don't know if we see that come to fruition. Again, it goes back to like consistency.
Sure, he's a roller coaster.
Yeah, it's just not all there. And I mean, I guess in all fairness, Wyatt Teller had some ups and downs, but there's also injury. I mean, there's been so many injuries on the offensive line across all of them.
That is the question that's going to be answered this year, one way or the other. The remedy they have is they could pick up his option and see how it goes, or they could not pick up his option and then basically say you're playing for your career essentially now, and then we could extend you there, or Browns could go a different way, and Jedrick Wills would still be the left tackle and start drafting a guy now, which may be what they do. Hard to say, because ultimately, even if Jedrick Wills is great, it's going to be really difficult to pay 4 premium offensive line contracts when they have Bitonio, they have Teller, and they have Conklin all on major deals. So it may just not work out that way from that standpoint. Unclear, but they've got to get an answer. But what is clear on that, though, is he's going to be your left tackle. Unless the only way he isn't is if James Hudson III just kicks his ass in camp and is just better. It's possible. James Hudson is a really, really hard worker. They really like him. I don't know if he's there yet, particularly in pass protection, but that is sort of the big thing that he's got to figure out for this year. But ultimately, he's going to be your guy. When the Browns kick off, unless he's injured, Deshaun Watson's blind side is going to be protected by Jedrick Wills. It's the only practical way forward. It's entirely a question of, do the Browns pick up his option or don't they? I think there's compelling arguments on both sides. I think if they don't, it is because they're already looking on to the next guy, even if he's going to be successful and ultimately figures it out. But that's sort of where that heads with that. And he's frustrating. I get it. They can't all be Donnie, who's at Fairmont State, who is, like I said, great kid, love him, but just king of bad body language. And hopefully that's the case with Jed, that he just sort of gets through that and figures it out. But we shall see. The other guy that the Browns are going to have to make a decision on is John Johnson, the third safety. I suspect that John Johnson, the third situation, is going to be a lot like Mike Priefer, that they are going to go in with a couple guys in free agency. They're going to be like, if we can get this guy or this guy, they're going to be like, okay, we're going to move on. If they don't, as was the case seemingly here, I think that Johnson could easily be back for another year, his final year of the contract. John Johnson is not nearly as bad as some people think he is, but he has the worst timing to be a dumbass.
Yes.
He says things. He's a terrible messenger. He has really bad credibility. He wants to be a leader so bad and has no credibility behind it. And he just drives you nuts. But he also has games where he's great. And you sit there and go, where has this been? The Ravens game is a great example of that. And some of the guys that I've seen pitched as replacements, like Marcus Epps of the Eagles, is horrific in coverage. Like the thing you seemingly are saying, no, John Johnson is bad at this. I want to upgrade it. I desperately want to get somebody better. And you're like, why would I replace John Johnson with Marcus Epps? I do think there are guys out there. Juan Thornhill jumps out to me, although I think he's everybody's favorite guy, which is why I think he's going to end up getting more money. The guy I think that could be sneaky good for the Browns is Jerron Harmon. He was great for the Raiders this past year. He's played for about 15 teams and could be that true free safety guy that can sort of help you out on that front and then sort of allows you to save some money, give you credibility back there, work with Grant Delpit better than Johnson might have. But if they don't get those guys, I think Johnson's going to be here. And I think it could be okay. Maybe with Schwartz, it can be better. I think, John Johnson, the third, has been the guy who's been saying over and over and over, he just wants to have a consistent theme, consistent messaging, consistent calling, and all these other things. Maybe that helps. Maybe Jim Schwartz and whoever they bring in Ephraim Banda can get him playing at a level that's more what you saw with the Los Angeles Rams.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, is that a possibility that he can get back to performing how he did when he was on the Rams? Because they had a really strong defense and he was a really good player. And then he came here and we just never saw that come to fruition.
It certainly seems like it's possible. I think with anything with the Rams, you could just, if you want to look back and sort of go hindsight, maybe he benefited from having really good players around him more than maybe we thought. But I do think there's something salvageable. Now it's a question, if Jim Schwartz wants to be a single high guy, some people don't trust John Johnson to be that guy. He's more of a split high. But again, if they can't get the guys they want, I don't expect the Browns to be like, screw it, we're cutting him anyway, and we're just going to go with the same thing with Jedrick Wills. They have some guy. They're going to have some guys that are like, these guys make sense. And if they don't, they're not going to create a hole for creating a hole's sake. This is the thing that I don't think people sort of understand. And we're not going to get into it today, but like, that's the same thing with Nick Chubb. And people are like, oh, they'll totally trade him if they get this and this and this. Great. Who's going to play running back next year? Like, the Browns are trying to fill the holes. They're not trying to make more of them.
Correct. That's important, Pete, that people remember that.
Right.
Oh,
anyway, so more coaching stuff.
I'm stressed out, Pete. Now I was feeling good. Now I'm stressed out.
That's all right. See, I brought you back down. We will be back next week. We'll see if they fill out the rest of the coaching staff. There's a sense that they want to get it all filled out before the combine. There's sort of this weird internal clock when it comes to that. We'll see if that gets done. Other than that, there's some more player stuff to go on, but here we are, a week away. The combine starts a week from today. We're going to start getting more answers. The combine is
Spandex Olympics, as you said.
That, and it's like the information sort of superhighway of getting rumors and everything else. We're going to hear a lot more stuff that's going to have a lot more sort of credibility behind it in terms of where things are going to go. So that part is also interesting. But either way, we will be back next week. Do us a favor, tell a friend, listen to the pod. We appreciate all the support. But anyway, we will be back.